Arizona Territory, 1873. Blood and tears stained the cave floor as Sarah Prescott fought to bring life into a world that had abandoned her. Banished by her own people for loving the wrong man, she labored alone in the unforgiving darkness. Miles away, Apache warrior Sŭ'ą paused on a ridge, his war-painted face turning toward a sound only his spirit could hear. Following ancient wisdom, he found her, a pale woman whose courage matched any warrior's. In a moment that defied generations of hatred, he removed his sacred war paint and placed it upon her trembling body. The paint that protected him in battle would now guard her in birth. As the infant's first cry echoed against stone walls, something profound shifted between them, a bond neither settler nor Apache law would recognize or allow. But when two worlds stand against them, will their forbidden connection survive? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 months earlier, Sarah Prescott stood before the town council of redemption. Greek, her hands clasped protectively over her swelling belly. The torn family Bible lay open on Pastor Caldwell's desk, the pages containing her marriage record conspicuously missing. "You bring shame upon this God-fearing community," Pastor Caldwell's voice rang through the meeting hall. His thin fingers drummed against the worn leather cover. No marriage record, no husband in sight, yet with child. The evidence of your sin is plain for all to see. Sarah's father, Jonathan, stood in the shadows, his weathered face carved with grief. A respected carpenter and widower, he had raised Sarah alone since she was 12, when influenza took her mother. Now at 22, his daughter faced the harshest judgment Redemption Creek could deliver. The photographer promised to return, Sarah said, her voice steadier than her heart. "Thomas loved me. He said we were married in the eyes of God if, not yet by paper." Whispers rippled through the room. Everyone remembered the charming Easterner with his traveling photography studio who had spent 3 weeks in their settlement the previous fall. His portraits now hung in several homes, lasting images that had outlived his promises. "Convenient words from a man long gone," the pastor replied. "Jonathan, you've been a pillar of this community. What say you of your daughter's condition?" Sarah watched her father's inner battle play across his face. He stepped forward, hat in hand. "My daughter has always been truthful. If she says they exchanged vows, private vows without witnesses or pastoral blessing are no vows at all," interrupted Councilman Wade, the general store owner who had once sought Sarah's hand for his son. "The Bible demands we cast out the immoral among us." Sarah's fingers found the small leather pouch at her neck. Inside, a tintype of her mother and a pressed wildflower Thomas had given her. "I'll go," she said before her father could speak again. "But know this, I've broken no promise to God or man. The only sin here is your unwillingness to show the mercy your Christ preached." The council's verdict came swiftly: banishment until she repented or proof of marriage appeared. They would allow her 1 pack of supplies, Christian charity they called it. That evening, Jonathan loaded a mule with more than the council had permitted. Extra food, a small medical kit, his wife's old midwifery book, blankets, and a hunting knife. "I'll find you," he whispered as they embraced at dawn's edge, beyond sight of the settlement. "After the snows melt, follow the western canyon. There's a line shack used by trappers in winter. It should be empty now." Sarah nodded, memorizing, her father's face as if for the last time. "I don't regret loving him," she said, "nor should you." Jonathan pressed his silver pocket watch into her palm. "Your mother would be proud of your courage." But Sarah never reached the line shack. 2 days into her journey, spring storms flooded the lower canyon, forcing her higher into unfamiliar territory. The mule spooked at lightning and bolted, taking half her supplies. For weeks, she followed game trails and water sources, marking her path on rock faces with charcoal. When labor pains began 3 days earlier than she expected, Sarah found herself in a limestone cave system, the entrance partially hidden by juniper. She arranged what remained of her supplies, a blanket, the midwifery book, a canteen, and a small bag of cornmeal, and prepared to bring her child into the world alone. Outside, an eagle circled, its cry piercing the canyon's silence as clouds gathered on the horizon. Inside the cave, Sarah opened the tattered Bible she'd carried despite everything, her fingers tracing the torn edges where pages had been removed. "They may erase me from their records," she whispered to her unborn child, "but no one can erase you from my heart." Så'ą moved like shadow through the juniper forest, his moccasins finding silent purchase on the rocky terrain. At 25 winters, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a warrior twice his age. Around his neck hung an eagle feather talisman, a gift from his grandfather, who had seen in the boy what others had not. "You walk between worlds," the old medicine man had told him, placing the sacred feather in his palm on his 16th birthday. "This will remind you that, like the eagle, you must sometimes soar above the tribal path to see what others cannot." Those words had shaped his journey, setting him apart within the band. While other young men boasted of coups counted and horses stolen, Så'ą spent long hours learning the healing ways, memorizing the sacred songs that called to the mountain spirits. He could track game across bare rock and read weather patterns in the flight of birds, but it was his gift for healing that truly distinguished him. Now, as the war party prepared for a raid against the cavalry outpost near the white settlement, Så'ą felt the growing distance between himself and his brothers. They painted their faces with symbols of protection and vengeance, while he added the marks of the healing spirits alongside his warrior signs. "Your heart is divided," said Nadar, his cousin and childhood friend, as they shared a small fire apart from the others. "The whites killed my father. Their disease took your mother, yet you hesitate to strike back." Så'ą turned the eagle feather between his fingers. "I do not fear battle," he replied, "but my grandfather taught me that for every life taken, the healer must save 10 to maintain balance. The whites understand no balance," Ndar spat into the fire. "Tomorrow we send a message they will understand." Before dawn, as the warriors mounted their horses, Så'ą noticed an eagle circling overhead, unusual behavior in the dim morning light. The great bird screamed once, then soared westward toward the canyonlands. "I must follow a different path today," he told the war chief, pointing to the eagle. "The spirits call me elsewhere." The old chief studied him with weathered eyes. "Your grandfather predicted this day would come. Go, but remember who you are and where you belong." Så'ą gathered his medicine pouch and weapons, then separated from the war party. For hours, he tracked the eagle's path, moving deeper into the territory that bordered the invisible line between Apache lands and those claimed by white settlers. Near midday, he paused atop a ridge overlooking a series of hidden canyons. The eagle had vanished, but something else called to him now. A feeling more than a sound, a disturbance in the natural harmony of the place. He closed his eyes, allowing his senses to expand beyond ordinary awareness, as his grandfather had taught. Him there a presence, someone in pain, someone alone. He descended carefully into the canyon, alert for signs of a trap. The cavalry had been known to use wounded Apache as bait, but this felt different. The spirits were guiding him with unusual urgency. When he found the cave entrance, partially concealed by juniper branches, Så'ą detected the unmistakable scent of birth blood mingled with yucca, a plant his people used to ease a mother's pain. Without hesitation, he removed his weapons, placing them outside in a gesture of peaceful intent, keeping only his medicine pouch and knife. Inside, his eyes adjusted quickly to the dimness. The sounds of labored breathing drew him deeper, and there he found her, a white woman alone and clearly fighting for her life and that of her unborn child. For a moment he stood perfectly still, centuries of conflict between their peoples. Hanging in the balance of this unexpected encounter, Then the woman looked up, her eyes meeting his without fear, only desperate hope. And in that moment, Så'ą understood why the eagle had led him here. The cave's air hung heavy with Sarah's labored breathing. 18 hours of solitary struggle had left her exhausted, her mother's midwifery book open but useless beside her. When the Apache warrior appeared in the cave's shadows, Sarah felt no fear, only a strange sense of answered prayer. "Help!" she whispered, one word bridging the chasm between their worlds. Så'ą moved with practiced efficiency. He built a small fire, its light revealing Sarah's pallid face and the blood-stained blanket beneath her. From his medicine pouch, he withdrew herbs she recognized, wild yucca root and juniper berries, and others foreign to her eyes. He spoke softly in Apache, the unfamiliar sounds oddly comforting as he mixed the herbs with water. When he offered the bitter drink, Sarah drank without hesitation. The contraction that followed nearly split her in two. "I can't," she gasped. "The baby's wrong somehow. I can feel it." Though he understood little of her words, Så'ą recognized the edge of surrender in her voice. He'd witnessed it in wounded warriors who had lost the will to fight. With gentle hands, he examined her belly, confirming his suspicion. The child was positioned poorly. In his culture, male healers rarely attended births, but his grandfather had insisted he learn all healing ways. Now, that knowledge might save 2 lives. Så'ą reached a decision. From his face, he began to remove the sacred war paint. Red ochre for strength, white clay for protection, black charcoal for spirit vision. Sarah watched in confusion as he mixed the paint with a bit of water and wild honey. When he raised his hand toward her face, she understood his intent and nodded permission. His fingers moved with ceremonial precision, painting symbols across her forehead and cheeks. With each mark, he sang softly, calling upon the mountain spirits and the strength of eagle medicine. The paint felt cool against her fevered skin, its earthy scent grounding her as another contraction built. This time, Sarah didn't fight the pain, but embraced it, following the rhythm of Så'ã's song. Something profound shifted, not just in her body, but in her spirit. The struggle transformed from solitary suffering into a dance with ancient forces, guided by this stranger's hands and voice. "Turn," he said in halting English, demonstrating with gestures. "Child, turn." Understanding, Sarah shifted to her hands and knees as he indicated. The position change brought immediate relief as the baby began to reorient. Så'ã's hands supported her back, his strength flowing into her through the points of contact. Outside, thunder cracked as a spring storm broke over the canyon. Inside, Sarah's waters finally released in a flood that signaled the birth's final stage. Through 3 more powerful contractions, Så'ą remained steady, his war-painted hands ready to receive the new life struggling to emerge. With a primal cry that echoed against the stone walls, Sarah pushed her child into the world and into the waiting hands of a warrior-turned-midwife. A girl, small but perfect, her first cry blending with the storm's fury and her mother's weeping relief. Så'ą worked quickly, tying off the umbilical cord with sinew from his pouch and cutting it with his obsidian knife. He cleaned the infant with warm water, then wrapped her in a soft deerskin he'd been carrying for trade. When he placed the baby on Sarah's chest, their eyes met over the miraculous new life between them. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, tears cutting paths through the war paint on her cheeks. Så'ą nodded, then carefully collected the umbilical cord, placing it in a small leather pouch, an Apache tradition to protect the child throughout life. He offered it to Sarah, this first gift marking the beginning of their unlikely bond. As dawn broke, painting the cave entrance with golden light, 3 hearts beat in rhythm where before there had been only solitude and fear. The war paint that had dried on Sarah's skin now symbolized a protection more powerful than either could have imagined, and a connection neither had sought. Dawn bled into dusk and back again as Sarah drifted between exhausted sleep and tender moments with her newborn daughter. Så'ą remained, establishing a small camp just outside the cave entrance. His presence brought an unexpected peace. The warrior moved with such quiet assurance that Sarah found herself trusting him despite everything she'd been taught about the Apache. On the third morning, Sarah ventured to the cave entrance, cradling her sleeping infant. She found Są'ą crafting something from yucca fibers, his fingers working with practiced precision. "For the child," he said in halting English, holding up the partially completed cradle board. He'd learned a few English words from traders and captives over the years. Sarah nodded, watching as he demonstrated how the finished carrier would strap to her back, leaving her hands free while keeping the baby secure. The practicality of it brought tears to her eyes. This simple tool would make survival possible. "Thank you," she said, then pointed to herself. "Sarah." She touched her daughter's downy head. "Dawn Echo." The name had come to her during labor, when her cries had echoed through the cave like the promise of a new day. Są'ą listened, then touched his chest. "Są'ą." He pronounced it slowly, so she could hear the nasal tones and subtle inflections. "It means swift wind." He pointed to the baby. "Now Sȯ'ą." When Sarah looked puzzled, he mimicked the rising sun with his hands. "Sunrise Song." 2. Names for one child. It seemed fitting for a daughter born between worlds. As Sarah's strength returned, Są'ą began teaching her simple survival skills. He showed her which plants were safe to eat, how to set snares for rabbits, and where to find clean water. For her part, Sarah shared what little she had: techniques for stitching deerskin that her mother had taught her, songs from her childhood, and stories from her Bible. They developed a rudimentary language combining English, Apache, and gesture. When words failed, they drew pictures in the dirt or used objects to convey meaning. The baby became their common purpose, bridging the vast cultural divide between them. One evening, as Są'ą returned with 2 rabbits for their meal, he froze at the cave entrance, raising his hand for silence. Sarah clutched the baby to her chest, instantly alert. Distant voices carried on the wind, men speaking English. "Hunters," Są'ą whispered, his expression grave. "Too close." He quickly extinguished their small fire and gathered their few belongings. Sarah followed him deeper into the cave system, away from the voices. The baby, as if sensing the danger, remained unusually quiet in her yucca fiber cradle. In the cave's depths, Są'ą produced a small pouch of tallow and moss that burned with minimal smoke, providing just enough light to navigate. They moved through narrow passages until they reached a small chamber with a ceiling opening that allowed fresh air, but no light to betray their presence. "Safe here," he said, arranging their blankets. "Wait, one day, maybe 2. As they settled in the hidden chamber, Sarah realized how quickly her definition of safety had changed. A month ago, safety meant the walls of Redemption Creek with its church steeple and familiar faces. Now, safety was an Apache warrior's watchful presence. And these limestone walls. When Dawn Echo fussed with hunger, Sarah nursed her by the dim light. Są'ą respectfully turned away, occupying himself by setting up a small perimeter of warning markers, pebbles balanced atop one another that would fall at the slightest disturbance. "Why help us?" Sarah finally asked the question that had lingered since his arrival. She gestured to herself and the baby, then to him with a questioning look. Są'ą was silent for a long moment. Then he touched the eagle feather at his neck and pointed upward. "Eagle spirit, guide me here." He placed his hand over his heart. "Grandfather, teach, all life sacred." He looked at the baby. Child of 2 worlds. Important. That night, as they listened for any sound of pursuit, Sarah realized they had become something unprecedented. Neither family nor strangers, but something in between for which she had no name. In Redemption Creek, the Sunday sermon buzzed with whispers of Sarah Prescott's fate. 2 months had passed since her banishment, enough time for her child to be born, if she had survived. "It is our Christian duty," Pastor Caldwell announced, from his pulpit, "to find this wayward woman and her innocent child." His thin fingers gripped the Bible with righteous fervor. The babe deserves proper Christian baptism and upbringing, regardless of its mother's sins. In the back pew, Jonathan Prescott's weathered hands tightened around his hat. He had searched for Sarah whenever he could slip away unnoticed, but the spring floods had made the western canyons impassable for weeks. Now, with the pastor organizing an official search party, his private mission would become impossible to conceal. After the service, notices appeared on the general store's bulletin board, crude sketches of Sarah with the words "wayward woman" and promises of a $10 reward for information leading to her recovery. Jonathan tore one down when no one was looking, folding it into his pocket with trembling fingers. "Joining the search, Prescott?" Lieutenant Griffin appeared beside him, cavalry uniform crisp despite the afternoon heat. The young officer had arrived at the nearby fort 3 months earlier, bringing with him an unusual hatred for the local Apache bands. "Someone needs to mind the woodshop," Jonathan replied carefully. Griffin's smile never reached his eyes. "Curious thing. Apache raiding. Parties have been spotted in those same canyons. Wouldn't it be something if your daughter had been taken by savages? Sarah's smart. She wouldn't allow herself to be captured. Women rarely have a choice in such matters." Griffin adjusted his gloves. "I've convinced the colonel to assign me and a small detachment to assist the search. Apache scalps or your daughter's rescue, either would be a fine outcome." Jonathan watched the lieutenant stride away, dread settling in his stomach. That evening, he packed provisions and his old hunting rifle, determined to find Sarah before Griffin could. The search party departed at dawn. 6 men from town, led by Pastor Caldwell, accompanied by Lieutenant Griffin and 3 soldiers. Jonathan set out alone an hour earlier, taking a different route he believed Sarah might have followed. By midday, the main party had found clear evidence of Sarah's passage. A torn piece of calico caught on a juniper branch matched a dress she had owned. Griffin brought tracking dogs, which picked up a scent trail leading toward the deeper canyons. "The dogs have something," one soldier called out, watching the animals strain at their leashes. Griffin examined the ground. "These tracks are recent. And look here, moccasin prints alongside a woman's smaller footprints." Pastor Caldwell blanched. "You don't think she's been taken by Indians? Or worse, gone willingly with one?" Griffin's voice carried a disgust that made even the pastor uncomfortable. "We'll make camp here and continue at first light. These canyons are treacherous after dark. Miles away, hidden in the cave system." Så'ą tensed. With senses honed by years of survival, he detected the faint but unmistakable scent of wood smoke on the evening breeze. Too much for a single campfire, too controlled for a wildfire. "People come," he told Sarah, who was nursing. Dawn echo by their small fire. "Many people." Sarah's arms tightened around her daughter. "My father, not only. Soldiers." Så'ã's expression was grim. "Must go deeper, safer place." As they prepared to retreat further into the cave network, Så'ã made a decision. While Sarah gathered their few belongings, he slipped out into the gathering dusk. With the stealth that had made him renowned among his people, he circled wide around the search party's camp. What he saw confirmed his fears. Tracking dogs, armed men, and a lieutenant whose hateful expression Så'ã recognized from a skirmish months earlier. This was no simple rescue mission. He worked through the night, creating false trails, leading away from the cave system, using every trick he had learned as a hunter to mislead those who would hunt them. Dawn crept into the deeper chamber where Sarah and Dawn Echo slept, filtered through the natural chimney overhead. Så'ã returned silently, his movements betraying his exhaustion after a night of creating false trails. "They follow wrong path now," he explained through gesture and his limited English. "Go north, we go west, soon." Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of their situation. As Dawn Echo nursed, Sarah studied the Apache warrior who had become their unexpected guardian. In the soft morning light, with his war paint washed away, she saw the humanity in him that her settlement stories had always denied. From her pack, Sarah withdrew a flat stone she had found days earlier. Using a piece of charcoal, she drew a simple picture of a woman, a baby, and a man walking away from pursuing figures. Så'ą studied the drawing, then took the charcoal. He added mountains to the west, and a circle that Sarah understood to represent a safe place. Their first map, a shared vision of escape. "Teach me," Sarah said, pointing to common objects around them. "Your words." Så'ą seemed surprised, then pleased. He began with simple things: water, tu; fire, ko; baby, me sahi. Sarah repeated each word carefully, stumbling over the unfamiliar sounds. In turn, she taught him English equivalents. For hours, as they waited for safety to move, they exchanged language like gifts. The pictograph stone became their dictionary, accumulating drawings and words in both languages. When direct translation failed, they created their own hybrid expressions, building a private language that belonged to neither world but solely to them. "Why did you leave?" Så'ą asked, gesturing to her belly and then to the settlement's direction. Sarah's eyes clouded. She drew the shape of a church and a man pointing away. "They cast me out. Unmarried mother." She pointed to her ring finger, then crossed it out to show the absence of a wedding band. Så'ã's brow furrowed. "Man who made baby." Sarah sketched a camera. "Photographer. Thomas. He promised to return." Her charcoal pressed harder as she added, "He lied." Understanding dawned in Så'ã's eyes. "My people different. Children, greatest gift, always welcome." A sudden cry from outside the cave made them both freeze. The baby, sensing their tension, began to fuss. Sarah clutched Dawn Echo to her chest, trying to quiet her as the voices grew closer. "They find true path," Så'ã whispered, gathering their few belongings. "Must go deeper." But the baby's cries grew louder, echoing against the stone walls. Sarah tried rocking, bouncing, nursing. Nothing calmed her daughter's sudden distress. Så'ã's expression changed from concern to resolve. He knelt beside Sarah and began a low, melodic chant, an Apache lullaby passed down through generations. The strange, beautiful sounds filled the chamber, somehow both foreign and familiar. To Sarah's amazement, Dawn Echo quieted immediately, her wide eyes fixed on Så'ã's face as he sang. The footsteps and voices outside passed by their hidden entrance, continuing down the main cave passage. When the danger had passed, Så'ã finished his song with a gentle touch to the baby's forehead. "She knows," he said simply. "Apache spirit." In her now, Sarah found herself reaching out, her hand touching his arm in spontaneous gratitude. It was their first contact beyond necessity, a bridge across the chasm of their different worlds. That night, as they made camp in an even more secluded chamber of the cave system, Sarah shared the story of her banishment in more detail, using their growing shared vocabulary and the pictograph stone to explain her journey. Så'ã listened intently, then shared his own story of walking a path between warrior and healer that left him sometimes at odds with his tribe's expectations. "Not belong," he said, pointing to himself, then to her. "Both not belong." Sarah nodded, a sad smile touching her lips. "Maybe we belong here," she said, gesturing to the space between them where Dawn Echo slept peacefully. In the middle, the pictograph stone lay between them, covered now with the beginnings of a language that existed nowhere else on Earth. A testament to the human capacity to connect across even the deepest divides. Their near discovery by the search party made it clear they needed to know every passage and chamber of their limestone sanctuary. With Dawn Echo securely strapped to Sarah's back in the yucca cradle, they began a methodical exploration of the cave system. Så'ã fashioned torches from pine resin and juniper bark that burned with minimal smoke. The dancing light revealed a subterranean world far more extensive than either had imagined. Narrow tunnels opened into cathedral-like chambers where water had sculpted the stone into fantastic formations over countless centuries. "My people speak of these caves," someone explained, as they discovered ancient handprints pressed into clay that had hardened to stone. Sacred places, doorways to spirit world. Sarah ran her fingers over the tiny handprints of children long dead. My Bible speaks of people hiding in caves too, prophets and holy men seeking sanctuary. As they ventured deeper, they discovered a natural spring bubbling from the rock face, providing clean, cold water. Nearby, a chamber with consistent, cool temperatures became their food storage area, where Så'ą hung strips of dried meat and Sarah arranged wild harvested nuts and berries on stone shelves. On the third day of exploration, they discovered a wall covered in petroglyphs, images carved into the stone, showing human figures, animals, spirals, and celestial symbols. Så'ą studied them with reverence. Old ones. Before Apache. Before white man. His finger traced a spiral pattern. The journey of spirit. Sarah was drawn to a series of figures holding hands in a circle. Look, they're dancing together. Using a piece of charcoal, Så'ą began sketching the cave system on a piece of deer hide he had tanned. Each chamber, passage, and feature was carefully mapped, creating a comprehensive guide to their underground realm. Sarah added English labels, while he wrote Apache names using symbols of his own. 2 names for each place, Sarah observed. Like Dawn, Echo, and Sȯ'ą. Så'ą nodded, pleased by her understanding. 2 worlds together. Their mapping expedition was interrupted when a section of ceiling collapsed in a shower of dust and stone, temporarily trapping them in a small chamber. Dawn Echo began to cry as the dust settled around them. No way back, Så'ą said after examining the fallen rocks. Too dangerous to move. Sarah fought rising panic. Is there another way out? Så'ą consulted their map. Maybe. Small passage. Not explored yet. With no choice but to move forward, they squeezed through a narrow fissure that Så'ą barely fit through. The passage wound downward, the air growing damper. Sarah's torch sputtered in the moisture, casting wild shadows as they descended. Listen, Så'ą whispered after they had crawled for what seemed like hours. A distant sound of rushing water reached them. Following the noise, they emerged into a grotto, where an underground stream cascaded into a pool before disappearing. Again into the earth, the water had carved a natural bridge of stone across the pool. Beautiful, Sarah breathed, the beauty momentarily overshadowing their predicament. Så'ą pointed to a shimmer of light reflecting on the water. Air. Light. Way out, following the light source, they discovered a narrow chimney that rose steeply upward. Rays of sunshine penetrated from above, illuminating a natural staircase of stone. I go first, Så'ą said, handing his torch to Sarah. Check safe. Sarah watched anxiously as he climbed the uneven steps, disappearing into the shaft of light. Long minutes passed before his face reappeared at the opening. Come, safe. Beautiful place. With Dawn Echo secure against her chest, Sarah carefully ascended. Så'ã's strong hand reached down to help her through the final narrow opening. As she emerged into sunlight, Sarah gasped. They stood in a hidden valley, completely encircled by steep canyon walls. A small waterfall fed a stream that wound through. Lush vegetation, a secret paradise invisible from the surrounding terrain. No tracks, Så'ą observed, scanning the pristine ground. No people, long time. Their map of the cave system had led them to an unexpected sanctuary, a place where neither Apache nor settler had claim, a neutral ground where they could perhaps begin to imagine a future. The hidden valley gleamed like an emerald set within the red rock canyon walls. Sarah stood transfixed, Dawn Echo cooing softly against her chest, as if the infant too recognized the sanctuary they had found. Safe. Place, Så'ã said, scanning the untracked ground. No one come here long time. The valley spanned perhaps 20 acres, fed by a waterfall that tumbled from the cliff face and formed a clear pool before meandering as a stream through grasses and wildflowers. Cottonwoods and junipers provided shade, while rock overhangs offered natural shelter. As they explored, Så'ã stopped suddenly, kneeling to examine a series of stone formations too regular to be natural. People lived here, he said, brushing away centuries of accumulated soil to reveal stacked stones, old ones, very old. Further investigation revealed the remnants of an ancient settlement, collapsed stone structures, broken pottery shards, and most surprisingly, terraced areas along the valley's gentle slopes. For growing food, Sarah observed, running her hands through the rich soil of one terrace. Her fingers encountered something hard. Digging gently, she unearthed a small clay pot, its seal still intact. Inside, preserved through countless seasons, lay a cache of corn seeds. Life waits, Så'ą said, his voice filled with wonder. Sleeps in earth, waits for right hands. Sarah cradled the ancient seeds. My mother taught me to garden. If these still live, moon is right for planting, Så'ą replied, glancing at the sky. First, we make home. They selected a natural alcove beneath a rock overhang, protected from weather and easily defended. With branches, hides, and woven grass, they created a comfortable shelter that blended into the landscape. Så'ą built a fire pit where smoke would dissipate through a natural chimney in the rock, leaving no visible sign of their presence. As days passed, the valley revealed its bounties: wild onions, berries, medicinal herbs, and small game. Sarah cleared one of the ancient terraces and carefully planted the corn seeds, offering a prayer that merged her Protestant upbringing with the reverence she had learned from Så'ą. Dawn echo thrived in the valley's peace, growing stronger daily. Her eyes tracked the flight of eagles that sometimes circled overhead, and she responded to words in both English and Apache. One evening, as twilight painted the canyon walls with amber light, Så'ą approached their camp with unusual solemnity. He carried a small bowl of pigments and a bundle of herbs. This place, he said, choosing his English words carefully, sacred to my people. Stories tell of hidden valley where ancient ones lived in peace, place between worlds. He knelt, spreading a deerskin on the ground, must ask permission from ancestors, from spirits of place. Sarah watched as he mixed the pigments with water and began to paint symbols on the deerskin: spirals, mountains, stars, and figures that seemed to dance between worlds. As he worked, he sang in a low voice, the Apache words rising and falling. Like the valley's gentle stream, when the painting was complete, he looked to Sarah. You too, he said, your prayers. Both worlds ask permission. Understanding the profound significance of the moment, Sarah knelt beside him. With dawn echo nestled between them, she offered words from psalms her father had taught her, prayers of gratitude and humility before creation's wonders. As their voices blended in the valley's gathering dusk, a breeze stirred the cottonwoods, sending leaves dancing around their shelter. To both, it felt like an answer. That night, Sarah dreamed of corn growing tall under a benevolent sun, of dawn echo running through fields with children of different colors, of a community where no one stood apart. She woke to find fresh tracks. Near their shelter, deer had come in the night, leaving prints in a perfect circle around their home. A sign, Så'ą said when he saw them. Valley accepts us. As if in confirmation, tiny green shoots emerged that day from the terrace where Sarah had planted the ancient seeds, corn that had waited perhaps centuries for the right hands to return it to the soil. Life persisting against all odds, like the unlikely family now tending it. The valley's rhythm changed as summer waned. Nights grew longer, mornings crisp with the promise of winter's approach. For Sarah and Så'ą, the shifting season brought new urgency to their daily work. Snow comes early in high places, Så'ą explained, pointing to the reddening sumac leaves. Must prepare. Their corn crop, descended from ancient seeds, had grown surprisingly well in the terraced soil. Sarah harvested the ears, showing Så'ą how to dry them for winter storage, as her mother had taught her. He nodded appreciatively at her knowledge. Your ways good for some things, he acknowledged. My ways good for others. Together we survive better. This philosophy guided their winter preparations. Sarah's settler background provided techniques for preserving food and insulating shelter, while Sȯ'ã's Apache knowledge offered survival methods perfected over countless generations in this harsh landscape. Each day brought new lessons. Sȯ'ã taught Sarah to identify which plants remained nutritious even in winter, which barks could be used for medicine, and how to read weather patterns in cloud formations. She showed him how to smoke meat for longer preservation and how to bank a fire to maintain heat through the night with minimal fuel. Their shelter evolved as well. Using techniques from both cultures, they created a semi-permanent structure against the rock alcove, part Apache wickiup, part settler cabin. Stone walls supported a framework of juniper branches, insulated with mud daub and grasses. A small smoke hole allowed their cooking fire's heat to circulate before escaping. "Need more warmth for winter nights," Sȯ'ã said one evening as temperatures dropped further. "I hunt rabbits tomorrow." The next day, he returned with 6 rabbits and taught Sarah how to prepare the furs, scraping the hides clean and stretching them to dry. Over the following weeks, they collected enough pelts to create a thick blanket, Sarah's sewing skills joining with Sȯ'ã's knowledge of hide preparation. As they worked side by side, stitching the furs together with sinew thread, Dawn Echo watched from her cradle, now 5 months old and increasingly alert to her surroundings. Her dark eyes, so like her mother's, followed their movements with remarkable focus. "She sees everything," Sȯ'ã observed proudly. "Strong spirit." "She's learning from both of us," Sarah replied, realizing how unique her daughter's upbringing would be, blending 2 worlds that elsewhere remained bitterly divided. Their rabbit fur blanket neared completion when Dawn Echo developed a sudden fever. Her normally lively eyes grew glassy, and her small body radiated alarming heat. "Sick," Sȯ'ã said, his face grave as he felt the baby's forehead. Without hesitation, he gathered his medicine pouch and headed toward the valley's eastern slopes. Sarah cradled her whimpering daughter, singing softly as she bathed the small face with cool water. When Sȯ'ã returned, he carried willow bark, a particular red clay, and several plants Sarah didn't recognize. "Apache medicine," he explained, preparing a mild tea from the willow bark. "For fever." Sarah hesitated briefly before helping Dawn Echo swallow tiny sips of the bitter liquid. Her mother's medical book had also recommended willow bark for fever, providing reassurance that their different healing traditions sometimes arrived at similar solutions. Through the night, they alternated. Care for the sick infant. Sȯ'ã made a poultice from the red clay and herbs, placing it on the baby's chest. Sarah continued with cool compresses and the willow tea. By morning, Dawn Echo's fever had broken. As the baby slept peacefully between them, Sarah realized how seamlessly they had combined their knowledge to save their daughter. The experience forged a deeper trust between them, a partnership tested by crisis and strengthened in its wake. The first snow came that evening, large flakes drifting silently through the valley. They sat at the entrance of their shelter, the completed rabbit fur blanket wrapped around all 3 of them as they watched the world transform. "Cut off now," Sȯ'ã said, but his tone carried no fear. "No one find us until spring." Sarah nodded, feeling a surprising sense of peace at their isolation. The winter ahead would be challenging, but also a reprieve from pursuit, a season of safety in which their unusual family could grow stronger. Under the blanket, Dawn Echo stirred against her mother's chest, her small hand reaching out to grasp Sȯ'ã's finger. In that simple gesture lay a truth none could deny. Whatever the outside world might think, in this valley they had become something new and unbreakable. Winter's grip on the hidden valley began to loosen as February yielded. To March, the snow retreated to shadowed corners, and the first green shoots emerged from thawing soil. For Sarah and Sȯ'ã, the changing season brought both hope and apprehension. Spring meant renewal, but also the return of danger from the world beyond their sanctuary. One crisp morning, Sȯ'ã discovered fresh tracks near the valley's hidden entrance, boot prints, not moccasins. Military issue, judging by the distinctive pattern. Beside the footprints lay a single brass button, its surface engraved with an eagle. Cavalry, he said grimly, showing Sarah the button. Too close. The discovery shattered their winter peace. Sȯ'ą spent the day securing their shelter, disguising its outline with brush and erasing all visible trails. That night he didn't sleep, instead perching on a high ledge overlooking the valley entrance, bow ready. By morning no soldiers had appeared, but Sȯ'ã's unease remained. With hand signals and hushed Apache words that Sarah now understood, he explained his plan to scout beyond their valley. "Dangerous," Sarah protested, clutching Dawn Echo, now 7 months old and trying to crawl. "Must know," he insisted, "for safety." Before departing, Sȯ'ã taught Sarah an urgent signal, a hawk's cry that would carry through the canyon if danger approached. He showed her a hidden crevice in the rock wall, where she and Dawn Echo could conceal themselves, provisioned with water and dried food. Sarah watched him disappear through the hidden entrance, a knot of fear tightening in her chest. During their months together, his presence had become essential to her sense of security, not just as protection, but as partnership. The valley felt eerily quiet without him. Sȯ'ã returned 3 days later, his face drawn with exhaustion and something deeper, grief. He had traveled far, moving with ghost-like stealth through territory, now crawling with cavalry patrols. What he discovered explained their increased presence. "Bad fight," he explained, as they sat by their small fire. "Soldiers attack Apache. Her camp. My cousin Nadar killed, others captured." He described witnessing a skirmish from a distant ridge, soldiers surrounding a small Apache hunting party. The officer leading the attack had been Lieutenant Griffin, his hatred evident even from a distance. "He say looking for woman taken by Apache," Sȯ'ã continued, his English more precise after months of daily practice. "Using you as reason to attack my people." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Because of me, they're killing Apache because they think I've been captured." Sȯ'ã nodded gravely. "Griffin tells soldiers Apache steal white woman, white baby, make soldiers angry, fight harder." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. People were dying because of assumptions about her disappearance, assumptions Lieutenant Griffin was deliberately inflaming. Her sanctuary had come at a terrible price she had never intended to pay. "I should go back," she whispered. "Tell them the truth." Sȯ'ã's eyes flashed. "They not believe. Say Apache force you to say this. Take Dawn Echo from you." His hand moved unconsciously to the knife at his belt. "Take me for prisoner or worse." "Then what can we do?" Sarah asked, tears streaming down her face. For the first time since they'd met, Sȯ'ã had no answer. He stared into the fire, conflict evident in every line of his body. His people were suffering while he remained hidden. Yet returning to help them meant abandoning Sarah and Dawn Echo, an impossible choice. That night, their shelter felt divided by the weight of separate loyalties. Sarah understood his torment all too well. She too felt pulled between worlds, the settlement that had cast her out, yet still contained her father, and this new life she had built with a man her people considered an enemy. Dawn Echo's soft breathing eventually bridged the silence. The child slept peacefully, unaware that her very existence challenged the boundaries between two hostile worlds. "Your people," Sarah finally said, reaching tentatively across the space between them. "I understand if you need to go to them." Sȯ'ã looked up, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "You and Dawn Echo my people now too." He took her hand. There, fingers intertwining, must find way for all to live. Outside their shelter an owl called, a sign of change coming according to Apache belief. Neither knew what form that change would take, but both understood their hidden valley could not remain separate from the wider world forever. Jonathan Prescott tracked game through the greening canyon with the focused determination of a man possessed. Since winter's end, he had spent every spare moment searching for his daughter, using hunting as his excuse to the townsfolk. His weathered, face had grown leaner, his eyes sharper with desperate hope. "She's alive," he muttered to himself, a mantra repeated through months of fruitless searching. "I'd know if she wasn't." Today, he followed a deer trail higher into the canyon system than he'd ventured before. The deer had disappeared around a sharp bend, but something else caught Jonathan's eye. A partial footprint in damp soil, smaller than a man's, yet not a child's. A woman's print. Heart racing, Jonathan examined the area more carefully. Nearby, he found a small tuft of fiber caught on a juniper branch. Yucca worked by human hands. Sarah had learned weaving from her mother. Could she have fashioned something from the desert plant? Following this tenuous trail, Jonathan discovered subtle signs of passage. A disturbed stone here, broken twig there, leading toward what appeared to be a solid rock face. Only by approaching from a particular angle did he notice the narrow crevice almost perfectly concealed by natural formations. Squeezing through, Jonathan found himself in a small chamber where faint light filtered from above. A second passage led deeper. Drawing his knife, unsure what he might encounter, he advanced cautiously through the limestone labyrinth. The sound reached him first, a child's laugh echoing through the stone corridors. Then voices, a woman's soft murmur answered by deeper tones in an unfamiliar language. Jonathan emerged from the passage into blinding sunlight, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected openness of the hidden valley. When his vision cleared, he froze in disbelief. 30 yards away, Sarah sat beside a small garden, a sturdy infant playing at her feet. Beside them knelt a man, unmistakably Apache, demonstrating how to weave a small basket from yucca fibers. It was the domestic tranquility of the scene that shocked Jonathan most. His daughter wasn't captive, but companion. The child, his grandchild, showed no fear of the warrior, reaching up occasionally to touch the man's long hair with evident familiarity. Before Jonathan could announce himself, the Apache warrior's head snapped up, instantly alert. In one fluid motion, he positioned himself between Sarah and the perceived threat, knife appearing in his hand. "No!" Sarah cried, recognizing her father despite the months of separation. "Så'ą, wait! It's my father!" Jonathan stepped forward, hands raised to show he meant no harm. "Sarah, my God, is it really you?" For a moment no one moved. Then Sarah was running toward him, the baby balanced on her hip. Tears streamed down Jonathan's weathered cheeks as he embraced his daughter, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms after months of uncertainty. "I thought you were dead," he whispered. "Or worse. I'm alive because of Så'ą," Sarah replied, turning to where the Apache warrior stood watching, his posture still wary. "He saved us both." Jonathan studied the man who had apparently rescued his daughter. Everything he'd been taught about the Apache warred with the evidence before his eyes. This man had not only spared Sarah, but had clearly protected her and the child. "You delivered my grandchild?" Jonathan asked, his voice rough with emotion. Sŭ'ą nodded once, his hand still on his knife. "She, strong woman. Baby, strong too." Jonathan knelt slowly, placing his hunting knife on the ground in a gesture of peace. After a moment's consideration, Sŭ'ą did the same. Inside their shelter, over a meal of corn cakes and rabbit stew, Jonathan learned the full story. Sarah's solitary labor, Sŭ'ã's timely arrival, the sacred war paint that had given her strength, and the months of shared survival that had forged their unlikely bond. "The town still searches for you," Jonathan said, bouncing his granddaughter on his knee. "And Lieutenant Griffin uses your disappearance to justify his campaign against the Apache." Sarah and Sŭ'ą exchanged glances, their silent communication not lost on Jonathan. "We know," Sarah said. "Sŭ'ã saw what's happening. His own cousin was killed." As darkness fell, Jonathan faced a choice: reveal their location or keep their secret. He watched his daughter move comfortably alongside the Apache warrior, saw how they functioned as partners, observed the tender care both showed to the child. Before departing, Jonathan removed his silver pocket watch, the family heirloom he had given Sarah before her banishment, and that she had traded for medicine when Dawn Echo was sick. "I'll return in 2 weeks," he promised, placing the watch on a stone near their shelter. "And I'll bring supplies. But no one else will learn of this place from me." The watch gleamed in the fading light. A promise, a connection to the world beyond, and a father's silent blessing of what he had found. Winter returned to the high country, sealing the hidden valley once more beneath a blanket of snow. The isolation that had once felt like exile now seemed a blessing, creating a space where Sarah and Sȯ'ą could explore each other's worlds without judgment or interference. The long evenings became a time of learning. By firelight, Sarah retrieved a tattered book of poetry, her sole literary possession, rescued from her pack before the mule bolted. Though Sȯ'ą couldn't read the English words, he watched intently as her finger traced each line. "Teach me," he said one evening, surprising her, "your marks that speak without sound." Sarah began with simple letters, using a stick to draw in the soft earth near the fire. Sȯ'ã's quick mind grasped the concept readily, though the arbitrary shapes of English letters bemused him. "Apache use pictures," he explained, demonstrating symbols that represented concepts rather than sounds. "Mountain, eagle, man, woman, picture tells story. But how do you write ideas that aren't things?" Sarah asked. "Like hope or fear?" Sȯ'ã smiled, drawing a rising sun for hope, a crouched figure for fear. "All ideas connect to something. We see, feel, touch. Your letters stranger magic to me than pictures, their lessons expanded beyond language." During the day, Sȯ'ã taught Sarah to identify plants even beneath snow, to read animal tracks that told stories of midnight journeys, to sense changes in weather before the clouds appeared. In return, she shared settler knowledge, mathematical, concepts for measuring and building, recipes that combined familiar ingredients in new ways, stories from her Bible that paralleled some Apache legends. Dawn Echo absorbed everything, her developing mind unburdened by the prejudices that separated their peoples. At 8 months old, she babbled sounds from both languages, responded to names in both traditions, and reached equally for either parent when frightened or hungry. One evening, as snow fell silently outside their shelter, Sȯ'ã unwrapped a small bundle he'd kept secure in his medicine pouch. Inside lay a collection of herbs, roots, and mineral powders, some familiar to Sarah from her mother's midwifery, others completely foreign. "Medicine pouch," he explained, arranging the contents carefully. "Each Apache healer makes their own, learn from elders, add new discoveries." Sarah brought out her own small collection of medicinal herbs gathered throughout the valley. Together, they compared knowledge, where their traditions overlapped and where they differed. Juniper berries for infection, willow bark for fever, yarrow for wounds. Some remedies were common to both cultures, other treatments were unique to each tradition. "Together, heal more things," Sȯ'ã observed, mixing their collections into a single pouch crafted from softest deerskin. 2 medicines stronger than one alone. As December deepened, Sarah realized Christmas was approaching. Though she had left behind the formal religion of Redemption Creek, certain traditions still mattered. She explained the holiday to Sȯ'ã, who listened with interest. "Apache have winter ceremony too," he said. "When day's shortest, we dance to call back sun, celebrate light returning to world." They decided to honor both traditions. Sȯ'ã taught Sarah the measured steps of the sunrise dance, while she sang the Christmas carols of her childhood. They decorated their shelter with evergreen boughs and red berries, symbols sacred to both their peoples. On the winter solstice, Sȯ'ã built a special fire and performed the ritual songs of his tribe. On Christmas Eve, Sarah recited the Nativity, story from memory, as they shared a feast of roasted rabbit, wild onions and corn cakes sweetened with honey. Dawn Echo watched the ceremonies with wide eyes, reaching for the flickering shadows cast by firelight. When São lifted her in the traditional blessing for Apache children, Sarah's heart swelled with unexpected emotion. As they sat side by side that night, watching the stars through the smoke hole in their shelter, Sarah felt Så'ã's hand find hers in the darkness. The touch was gentle, tentative, crossing a boundary neither had yet acknowledged. For a breathless moment, the only sound was the crackling fire and dawn echo's soft breathing from her cradle. Sarah turned toward him, her face illuminated by firelight. When he leaned closer, his intention clear, Dawn Echo chose that moment to wake with a hungry cry. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, a recognition that their partnership had grown into something deeper. As Sarah tended to the baby, Så'ã added wood to the fire, his movements deliberate and thoughtful. The mixed medicine pouch lay between them on the ground, physical proof that two traditions could not only coexist but strengthen one another, just as they themselves had done. The first thaw came earlier than expected, releasing the hidden valley from winter's quiet isolation. Snowmelt swelled the stream to a rushing torrent, and green shoots pushed through the softening earth. Dawn Echo, now 10 months old, took her first unsteady steps on the damp ground, falling often, but immediately struggling back to her feet with determined coups. Strong-willed, like her mother, Jonathan observed during his monthly visit. Since discovering them, Sarah's father had become their tenuous connection to the outside world, bringing supplies and news. Today, his weathered face carried more worry lines than usual. The cavalry's expanding patrols. Lieutenant Griffin's been promoted to captain. Seems the higher-ups approve of his aggressive tactics against the Apache. Så'ã's expression hardened at this news. He had been making moccasins, 3 pairs of varying sizes laid out on a smooth stone. His hand stilled over the smallest pair, designed for Dawn Echo's newly walking feet. "How many more dead?" he asked quietly. Jonathan sighed. 8 Apache in the last skirmish. 3 soldiers. There's talk of bringing in reinforcements from Fort Grant. Sarah gathered Dawn Echo into her arms, as if physical closeness could shield her child from the harsh realities beyond their sanctuary. And Redemption Creek? Do they still search for me? Less actively, Jonathan admitted, but Griffin keeps the story alive, claims finding you is a matter of military honor now. He hesitated before adding, "There are rumors that Pastor Caldwell had arranged a family in town to take the baby when you're found, to raise it properly in Christian ways." Sarah's arms tightened around her daughter. "They will never take her from me." That night, after Jonathan departed with promises to return soon, an unusual tension filled their shelter. Så'ã moved restlessly, checking and rechecking the moccasins he'd made, adding reinforcement stitches where none were needed. "You're thinking of your people," Sarah said finally, recognizing the conflict in his movements. Så'ã nodded, his face illuminated by firelight. 8 more dead. My cousins, friends, while I hide here, safe. You've protected us, Sarah said, softly. Without you, Dawn Echo and I wouldn't have survived. And without me, maybe no more Apache die, he countered. Griffin hunts you, kills my people in searching. The truth of his words hung heavily between them. Their sanctuary had come at a price, paid in blood by others. The paradise they'd created in the hidden valley couldn't remain separated from the conflicts that raged beyond the canyon walls. I need to see, Så'ã said suddenly, must know true situation. Sarah understood his meaning immediately. You want to go to your people, just to watch, from distance. He looked at her intently. One night only, return before sunrise. Though fear clutched at her heart, Sarah nodded. Be careful. Dawn Echo needs her father. The word hung in the air between them, father. They had never formally defined his relationship to the child, but the truth was undeniable. In every way that mattered, Så'ã had become Dawn Echo's father, regardless of whose blood ran in her veins. Before departing, Så'ã laid out the 3 pairs of moccasins he'd completed, one for each of them. For journey, he said cryptically, when time comes. Sarah waited through the longest night she had experienced since giving birth. Every sound outside their shelter, each rustle of wind through juniper, each call of a night bird, made her start with anxiety. Dawn Echo sensed her mother's unease, sleeping fitfully and waking often. Så'ą returned as promised before dawn, his face grim with what he had witnessed. The Apache camp had been moved to more defensible ground. There, numbers diminished by Griffin's campaign, where scouts reported that soldiers were systematically exploring the canyon systems, using Apache guides who had been coerced or bribed into cooperation. They will find Valley, eventually, he concluded. Not safe here much longer. The reality they had both avoided acknowledging could no longer be denied. Their hidden paradise was temporary, a pause in the storm, not an escape from it. "Where can we go?" Sarah asked, gazing at Dawn Echo sleeping peacefully, unaware that her world was about to change again. "Your people would never accept me." "My people would never accept you." Så'ą sat beside her, taking her hand in a gesture that had become natural between them. "There are places," he said slowly, "far north, where some Apache live with other tribes, some with white traders. Places where boundaries blur. How would we reach such places? The journey would be dangerous for all of us." Så'ą nodded toward the moccasins he had made. One step at a time, together. That night, they slept closer than usual, Dawn Echo between them. Outside their shelter, spring continued its relentless advance, bringing both new life and the certainty of change. Jonathan Prescott arrived at the hidden valley earlier than expected, his approach signaled by the mockingbird call he'd established with Sarah. His weathered face bore news too important to wait for their scheduled meeting. "Griffin's men found traces near the lower canyon entrance," he said without preamble. "They're convinced Sarah's being held somewhere in this mountain range." Så'ą and Sarah exchanged grave glances. They had been discussing departure for weeks, but the immediacy of the threat changed everything. "How close?" Så'ą asked. "Too close." Jonathan removed his hat, revealing silver hair that had grown noticeably thinner since winter. 3 days, maybe 4, before they start systematic searches of every cave system. Dawn Echo toddled between them, oblivious to the tension, her small hands reaching for her grandfather's beard. Jonathan scooped her up, his eyes softening momentarily before returning to the grave matter at hand. "I've been making inquiries," he continued, "discreetly. There's a settlement in southern Colorado Territory, 3 days' ride north of Trinidad." Extracted a folded paper from his vest pocket, a rough map drawn in careful detail. "It's called Harmony Creek, founded by Quakers and dissident Mormons who rejected polygamy. They've got a reputation for accepting unusual situations." "Unusual?" Sarah asked, taking the map. "Mixed families," Jonathan clarified. "Indian and white. They don't ask many questions about who you were before, only who you choose to be. Now," Så'ą studied the map with a tracker's precision. "Long journey, dangerous territory." "Very dangerous," Jonathan agreed. "You'd need to cross Apache lands, then Comanche territory, then past several military outposts. It would take weeks, maybe months, depending on your pace with the child." Sarah traced the route with her finger, estimating the vast distance. "Why would they accept us when no one else would? The founder lost his wife in childbirth. An Arapaho medicine woman saved his infant son. He never forgot the debt." Jonathan's voice softened. "I've heard they judge by actions, not ancestry." Så'ą walked to the valley's edge, gazing toward the distant mountains that had been his ancestral home. Sarah knew the struggle within him. Leaving these lands meant abandoning centuries of tradition, the very earth where his ancestors' spirits dwelled. "Your people," she said gently, "would they give you their blessing to leave?" "My people scattered now," he replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "Those who survive hide in high places, far from old camps, old ways changing, maybe ending. He turned to face her, his expression resolute. Dawn Echo needs future. You need future. I choose that. Jonathan cleared his throat. There's another matter to consider. In the eyes of both your peoples, you have no formal bond. He shifted, uncomfortably. At Harmony Creek, they'd expect you to be husband and wife. The unspoken reality that had grown between them over the past year now demanded acknowledgement. They had become partners in survival, parents to Dawn Echo, and companions in isolation. But they had never defined what they were to each other. I leave you to discuss this, Jonathan said, sensing the weight of the moment. I'll check the lower trail for signs of patrols. When they were alone, Sarah approached Sȯ'ą, her heart beating rapidly. We've never spoken of such things. Apache way's different, he said carefully. Man proves worth to woman's family, brings gifts, shows he can provide. You've proven your worth 1,000 times over, Sarah replied softly. You delivered my child. You kept us alive. You taught me to see the world through new eyes. Sȯ'ą reached into his medicine pouch and withdrew something that caught the afternoon light. A delicate bracelet crafted from strands of silver wire, traded from Jonathan, interwoven with strips of the finest deerskin. The silver represented her world, the leather his, twisted together into something stronger than either alone. Made this, he said simply, holding it toward her, for you, for promise. Sarah extended her wrist, wordless, as he secured the bracelet. Where their fingers touched, a current passed between them. Acknowledgement of feelings that had grown slowly but inevitably during their shared exile. That evening, as Jonathan returned with news of clear trails, they performed a ceremony that honored both traditions. Sȯ'ą sang the Apache marriage blessing while Sarah recited vows from memory. Jonathan stood witness, holding Dawn Echo, who watched with solemn curiosity as her parents formally united their paths. No church sanctioned their union, no tribal elder gave official blessing, yet in the sacred space of their hidden valley, beneath stars that had witnessed countless human promises, their commitment felt more binding than any formal ceremony could provide. Dawn's first light found them already moving, the hidden valley disappearing behind them like a dream reluctantly surrendered. Sarah carried Dawn Echo in the improved cradle board Sȯ'ą had crafted, while he led the way with the silent efficiency of a lifetime spent moving unseen through hostile territory. They traveled light. One pack of essentials, Jonathan's detailed map, the mixed medicine pouch and a few treasured items, Sarah's mother's Bible, Sȯ'ã's eagle feather talisman, and a small pouch of the ancient corn seeds to plant in their new home, wherever that might be. Stay high. Ground, Sȯ'ã instructed as they paused at midday. Follow ridgelines, harder to track. Sarah nodded, adjusting Dawn Echo, who watched the changing landscape with wide-eyed fascination. At 14 months, the child seemed to understand the gravity of their journey, remaining unusually quiet when silence was needed. Jonathan had arranged to meet them at 3 points along their route, bringing supplies and information about patrol movements. The first rendezvous would come in 2 days at an abandoned trapper's cabin near the territorial border. Their first day passed without incident, Sȯ'ã's intimate knowledge of the terrain keeping them well away from established trails. They made camp in a shallow cave as dusk fell, eating cold rations to avoid the telltale smoke of a fire. How far to Colorado? Sarah asked, studying the map by moonlight. Many days, Sȯ'ã replied. First, cross Big River, most dangerous part. The Rio Grande lay ahead, swollen with spring runoff, its crossing points likely watched by both military patrols and hostile Apache bands who would view Sȯ'ã as a traitor for his alliance with a white woman. On the third day, they descended toward the river under cover of a thunderstorm. Rain plastered Sarah's hair to her face as she struggled to keep Dawn Echo dry beneath an improvised shelter of rabbit skins. The child whimpered at the thunder but didn't cry out. River too high, Sȯ'ã announced grimly when they reached the bank. The normally fordable crossing had become a churning torrent, carrying entire trees in its muddy current. "We can't turn back," Sarah said, the gravity of their situation settling heavily upon her. Griffin's men were surely combing the canyon. System by now, perhaps already discovering their abandoned shelter in the hidden valley. Så'ą surveyed the river with a tracker's calculating eye. Upstream, narrower crossing, but close to cavalry post. They followed the riverbank for miles, moving by night to avoid detection. Dawn Echo developed a cough from the persistent dampness, her small body warm with fever against Sarah's chest. The mixed medicine pouch provided herbs to ease the child's symptoms, but Sarah's worry grew with each labored breath. Finally, they reached the narrower crossing, a place where the river squeezed between two rocky outcroppings. Så'ą constructed a small raft from driftwood and deerskin, secure enough to carry Sarah and Dawn Echo while he swam alongside, guiding it across. "Water cold," he warned. "Current strong. Hold tight to child." The crossing began well, Så'ã's powerful strokes pulling them steadily toward the far shore. Halfway across, disaster struck. A submerged log rammed into the makeshift raft, tipping Sarah sideways. Dawn Echo slipped from her grasp, the current instantly sweeping the child downstream. Sarah's scream tore through the air as Så'ą released the raft and dove after the baby. For heart-stopping moments, both disappeared beneath the churning surface. Sarah fought her way toward shore, desperate to run downstream in pursuit. When Så'ã surfaced, Dawn Echo clutched tightly to his chest. Relief crashed over Sarah like a physical force. He struggled against the current, the child's weight and his own exhaustion evident in his labored movements. With a final surge of strength, he reached a sandbar, collapsing with Dawn Echo safely atop his chest. Sarah waded through shallower water to reach them. The baby coughed and cried, a blessed sound after the terrifying silence, but Så'ã lay motionless, a gash visible on his temple where he'd struck a rock during the rescue. "Så'ã," Sarah called, dropping to her knees beside him. "Wake up, please." His eyelids fluttered, consciousness returning slowly. "Child safe?" he asked immediately. "Thanks to you," Sarah confirmed, cradling Dawn Echo, who reached for Så'ã's face with chubby fingers. That night, they made camp in a thicket well away from the river. Sarah tended Så'ã's wound, cleaning it with herbs from their medicine pouch and binding it with strips torn from her petticoat. His breathing grew more labored as night deepened, fever setting in despite her ministrations. In the quiet darkness, with Dawn Echo finally sleeping peacefully between them, Sarah kept vigil. Her hand found his, their fingers intertwining as they had done countless times before. But tonight, the gesture carried new significance, acknowledgement of the depths they would brave for each other, for their unlikely family forged in the crucible of shared survival. The morning sun had just crested the eastern ridge when Så'ã froze, raising one hand in silent warning. Sarah immediately stilled, drawing Dawn Echo closer against her chest. After 2 weeks of arduous travel, they had nearly reached the Colorado border and safety. "Horses," Så'ã whispered, his recovered strength evident in the alertness of his posture. "Military, 4, maybe 5. They were traversing a narrow canyon, the only passage through the rocky terrain ahead. Sheer walls rose on either side, offering no easy escape. Så'ã guided them toward a cluster of boulders, the only available cover. "Stay here," he instructed, securing his knife. "I circle back, make false trail." Before he could move, the distinctive click of a rifle hammer echoed through the canyon. Captain Griffin stood on a ledge above them, his weapon trained on Så'ã's chest. "Finally," Griffin called, satisfaction hardening his voice. "The Apache who stole Sarah Prescott." 4 soldiers emerged from hidden positions, rifles ready. The trap had been meticulously planned, perhaps following Jonathan's trail after his last supply delivery. Sarah's heart sank at the thought of her father captured or worse. "No one stole me," Sarah declared, stepping forward despite Så'ã's protective gesture. "I chose to go with my husband." Griffin's face contorted with disgust. "Husband? This savage?" He descended from the ledge, keeping his rifle aimed steadily. Stockholm Syndrome, they call it. Captives developing unnatural attachment to their abductors. "I was never captive," Sarah insisted, Dawn Echo beginning to whimper at the tension in her mother's voice. "He saved us when no one else would." Griffin ignored her, addressing the youngest soldier. "Private Ellis, take the woman and child. The rest of you secure the Apache." The young private hesitated, his eyes moving between Sarah's defiant stance and the child in her arms. "Sir, she doesn't appear to be under duress." "She's been brainwashed, Private," Griffin snapped. "Would any sane white woman willingly consort with a savage? Now follow orders." As Private Ellis reluctantly approached, Så'ą made his decision. With lightning speed, he pushed Sarah behind the largest boulder, then faced Griffin with empty hands raised. "No fight," he said clearly. "Let them go to Colorado. Take me instead." Griffin's laugh held no humor. "Noble sacrifice. You're a deserter from your tribe and a kidnapper. The penalty is the same either way." "He speaks the truth," called a new voice from the canyon entrance. Jonathan Prescott emerged, hands raised to show he carried no weapon. "My daughter goes willingly with this man. I've witnessed their life together." Griffin's eyes narrowed. "Prescott should have known you were involved." He gestured to his men. "Arrest him too. Conspiracy with hostiles." The standoff intensified as Dawn Echo began crying in earnest, her wails echoing off the canyon walls. Sarah hushed her desperately, knowing their options were disappearing with each passing moment. "Think carefully, Griffin," Jonathan warned. "The Apache elders know we're here." As if summoned by his words, 3 figures appeared on the rim of the canyon. Apache elders in full ceremonial dress, their presence commanding immediate attention. They made no threatening moves, but their silent observation carried unmistakable weight. "What is this?" Griffin demanded, his rifle wavering between multiple targets. "The child's blessing ceremony," Jonathan explained calmly. "Apache tradition. For children of mixed parentage, the elders granted special permission. It was a magnificent bluff. The elders had actually been tracking Så'ą since he entered their territory, initially to confront him about his perceived betrayal. Instead, they had observed the genuine family bond, witnessing his near sacrifice at the river to save the child. Griffin's face flushed with anger. "This changes nothing. They're coming with us to the fort." Private Ellis suddenly lowered his rifle. "Sir, with respect, I can't participate in separating that child from her parents." "Parents!" Griffin spat the word. "That Apache is not—" "He is in every way that matters," Sarah interrupted, her voice steady as she stepped forward with Dawn Echo. The child, sensing the focus upon her, reached one small hand towards Så'ą, while keeping the other firmly grasped in her mother's dress, a living bridge between worlds. The moment crystallized, each person seeing the truth before them. A broken arrow lay on the ground between them, dropped by one of Griffin's men during the confrontation, its fractured shaft somehow emblematic of the hatred that had been overcome. "Captain Griffin," Jonathan said into the tense silence, "you have a choice now that will define your career. These people are traveling legally to Colorado territory, where mixed marriages are recognized. The Apache elders have given their blessing. What story would you rather tell your superiors?" The journey's final miles unfolded beneath a canopy of autumn leaves, the aspens gold and crimson, a fitting welcome to their new homeland. Captain Griffin had retreated, not from compassion, but from the calculation that Apache elders as witnesses would complicate his report beyond redemption. With a warning that they must never return to Arizona territory, he allowed them passage north. Harmony Creek appeared first, as wisps of chimney smoke rising against distant mountains. The settlement nestled in a broad valley, its buildings a curious blend of Eastern architecture and Western practicality. Fields of late harvest stretched in neat rows, and a small church steeple rose beside a structure that resembled an Apache council house. "Different," Så'ą observed, his hand resting protectively on Dawn Echo's back as she dozed in her carrier. Not all white, not all Indian. Sarah nodded, understanding his meaning. Among the people visible from their vantage point, she noted diverse complexions and clothing styles, traditional buckskins alongside calico dresses, dark hair and light working side by side in the fields. Jonathan, who had accompanied them for the final leg of their journey, consulted his carefully drawn map. "The founder's house is there," he said, pointing to a 2-story structure near the creek. "Isaac Thornton, the man whose son was saved by the Arapaho healer." Their approach drew curious, but not hostile attention. Children paused in their play to watch the newcomers, and a tall, bearded man emerged from the main house. His weathered face bore deep smile lines around the eyes, and a single eagle feather adorned his otherwise conventional hat. "Welcome to Harmony Creek," he called, approaching. With open hands. "I'm Isaac Thornton," Sarah stepped forward. "I'm Sarah Prescott Så'ą." She used both names deliberately, watching for his reaction. "This is my husband Så'ą, our daughter Dawn Echo, and my father Jonathan." Thornton's gaze moved between them, noting Så'ã's Apache features, Sarah's obvious European descent, and the child who carried elements of both. His expression remained open, curious rather than judgmental. "Apache?" he asked Så'ã directly. "Yes, Western Apache." Thornton nodded thoughtfully. "We have 3 Arapaho families, 2 Ute and 1 Cherokee. No Apache yet," he smiled. "Until now, perhaps." That evening, they shared their story with Thornton and the Settlement's Council, 5 men and 4 women of various backgrounds who governed community affairs. Sarah spoke of her banishment, Så'ã of finding her in the cave, both of their journey to build something new from the ruins of their separate lives. "The question before us," said a grey-haired woman who had introduced herself as Martha Two Rivers, "is not whether you may stay, all are welcome who come in peace, but how you will contribute to our community." Så'ã untied his medicine pouch. "I know healing ways, plants, bones, spirits," Sarah added. "I can teach reading and figures, and we've brought ancient corn seeds that thrived in our valley." Within a week, they were established in a small cabin near the creek's edge. The community helped raise the walls and roof in a single day of shared labor. Så'ã's knowledge of traditional adobe techniques improved the design, while Sarah's organization of the interior created a home that honored both their heritages. In the spring, Jonathan returned to Arizona to sell his business, bringing Sarah's silver pocket watch and several books she had treasured as a child. He settled in a cabin nearby, his woodworking skills immediately valued by the growing community. One warm afternoon, a traveling artist visited Harmony Creek, offering to make portraits for a modest fee. Sarah and Så'ã sat together, Dawn, Echo on their laps, for the family's first formal image. The finished drawing captured not just their likenesses, but the quiet dignity of their hard-won peace. 5 years passed like the creek's steady flow. Dawn Echo grew tall and strong, joined by 2 younger siblings, a boy with Så'ã's keen eyes and a girl with Sarah's determined chin. The ancient corn from their hidden valley thrived in Colorado soil, its heritage seeds now shared throughout. The settlement. On special occasions, Så'ã still prepared the sacred war paint, but its purpose had transformed. Now, during naming ceremonies for newborns of all backgrounds, he applied a small mark to each infant's forehead, a blessing of protection that bridged spiritual traditions. Sarah established a school where children learned in both English and Apache, their young minds untroubled by the divisions that had once seemed insurmountable to their parents. Visitors from both Redemption Creek and various Apache bands occasionally arrived, initially suspicious, but departing thoughtful. The family portrait hung above their fireplace, a simple drawing that captured what words could not: the possibility of harmony in a divided world, earned through courage, compassion, and the unwavering belief that love could transcend the arbitrary boundaries of human creation.